I have always been drawn to the stories that make you check the locks twice. The ones told in hushed tones around late-night fires, or found in creased journals detailing encounters that defy all logic. From whispering ghosts in abandoned hallways to shadowy encounters in quiet woods. These are the tales of terrors that lurk just beyond the edge of our vision. So turn the lights down low and get ready to confront what goes bump in the night. You're listening to Don't Whistle to the Wind. Hello and welcome in, my little horror fiends, to episode 3 of Don't Whistle to the Wind. On this episode, I have 5 scary national park encounter stories from park rangers themselves. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Our first story is called A Hunger That Never Dies. It was my 6th year as a backcountry ranger in the Arapahoe Roosevelt National Forest. You learn pretty quickly that the mountains have a way of swallowing up the careless, but this was different. My name is Elias, and I have worked as a park ranger for the last 6 years. You get used to the solitude, the howling above the tree line, and the occasional idiot tourist who ignores the warnings about elk in rutting season. You think you know the woods better than anyone, but the woods have their own rules, and I learned that the hard way last Sunday. I was doing a late afternoon sweep of the Ute Trail, just above the timberline. The sun was dipping below the peaks, casting those long, jagged shadows that always make the forest look a little bit more sinister than it actually is. That's when I heard it. It sounded like an animal in distress, a high-pitched, wailing screech piercing through the trees. I checked my radio. Reception was spotty at best, but this sounded like a hiker had taken a bad fall down one of the rocky embankments. Standard procedure was to wait for backup or search and rescue, but the sound was so human and the light was fading fast. I couldn't just sit there and do nothing. I grabbed my flashlight, hopped off the marked path, and headed down into the gully. Silence, just the crunch of my own boots against the loose gravel. Then the whistling started. It was coming from the dense thicket of crummels, those gnarled, wind-beaten pine trees that grow right before the tree line ends. In these mountains, we have a saying passed down from the local folklore. If the whistling is near you, it means they're far. If it's far away, it means they're near. The whistle sounded incredibly close, almost in my ear. The sound was piercing and sharp, echoing as if it were bouncing off a canyon, miles away. A sudden, paralyzing wave of dread washed over me. My skin tightened, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I stopped dead in my tracks and panned my flashlight to the right. Standing about 30 yards away, partially illuminated by my beam, was what I thought was a large buck, but as the light swept over it, the silhouette shifted. It stood on its hind legs. The creature was tall, emaciated, and unnaturally distorted. It wasn't a bear or an elk. The head hung at an impossible broken angle, and its eyes, they didn't reflect my flashlight like a normal animal's would. They were dull, unblinking, and fixated directly on me. And then it spoke, in the dead, gravelly voice of my patrol partner, Pete, who had requested a transfer to another district a month prior. "Elias," it rasped. "Help me. My leg is broken." My stomach dropped into a bottomless pit. It mimicked his voice, but the rhythm was entirely off. It didn't breathe when it spoke. It just vibrated the words out. I knew then what we were dealing with, a skinwalker. I didn't stick around to hear it say anything else. I turned and bolted. I didn't care about the path, the regulations, or the drop-offs. I just ran up the straight, rocky incline, my heart hammering against my ribs. Behind me, the sound of the forest went entirely dead. No wind, no crickets, no rustling underbrush. Just the sickening sound of something sprinting on all fours, bounding over the rocks with impossible, inhuman speed. Every time I took a breath, I could smell the faint, choking scent of burning and decaying flesh. I made it to the maintenance road, throwing myself toward my parked Jeep. I scrambled with the keys, dropped them in the gravel, and frantically scooped them up. All the while, the thing circled into the tree line at the edge of the clearing. It didn't attack. It just stood there in the shadows, watching me hungrily as I twisted the ignition, floored the accelerator, and sped down the mountain. I haven't been back on the trails since. I put in for a desk transfer the next morning. People think I just had a close encounter with an aggressive mountain lion or a rabid bear. But I know what I saw, and I know what it was trying to do. Be careful out there. If you ever hear someone calling your name from the woods, for the love of God, don't answer. And if you hear something whistling in the woods, never whistle back. Our second story is called The Forest Threshold. We don't talk about them in the logs. Every ranger in our district learns the rule during their first week, whispered over lukewarm coffee in the station. If you are 40 miles out into the back country and you find a perfect, polished set of indoor stairs leading to nowhere in the middle of the old-growth pines, you look the other way. But yesterday, I broke the rule. I was on a standard grid search for a lost hiker in the dense, unforgiving backcountry near the Sierra National Forest border. The sun was sinking behind the canopy, painting the sky an angry, bruised purple. The forest went dead. The birds stopped singing, and the air grew thick and heavy, smelling faintly of dirt and pine needles. That's when I saw them. It was a flawless, varnished oak staircase, the kind you'd find in a Victorian home, sitting completely detached from any building, rising about 12 steps up into the empty air. I stopped dead in my tracks. My department radio started crackling with loud, distorted static. Then I heard it. A faint, frantic knocking. It sounded like someone was tapping on a hollow wall right above at the top of the steps. I know the protocols. I've read the stories from the old search and rescue officers and the anomalies they've encountered. They always said that the stairs were harmless as long as you kept your distance. But the sound was rhythmic, urgent. It sounded exactly like my own call sign before being tapped out in Morse code. Against every instinct, I took 3 steps closer. My compass began spinning wildly in my hand. I placed my boot on the bottom riser. The moment the weight of my boot hit the wood, the ambient forest sound vanished entirely. It was replaced by a roaring pressure in my ears, like diving deep underwater. The knocking at the top stopped. I looked up. The 12th step didn't end in the blue evening sky anymore. It opened into a dimly lit, narrow corridor that stretched into absolute blackness. And standing at the mouth of it was a figure. It was too tall, wrapped in what looked like a black robe, but it didn't have a face. Just smooth, pale skin, where the eyes and nose should be. It tilted its head in a violent shake, and the slick, faceless skin tore, opening into a gaping, serrated smile. A primal wave of terror slammed into me, finally cutting through whatever trance had drawn me there. I stumbled backward, my heel slipping off the edge of the first step, and I hit the mossy, forest floor hard. The roaring in my ears died. The forest erupted back into life with the sound of chirping crickets and rustling leaves. I scrambled to my feet and ran blindly through the trees, not looking back until I saw the glow of my ATV's headlights an hour later. I will never write an official incident report for what I saw. Nobody wants to lose their badge over an impossible anomaly in the woods. I am safe back at the park ranger station now, but every time I close my eyes, I still hear that rhythmic tapping, and worst of all, when I look out my window into the pitch-black tree line, I swear, I can see the stairs creeping just a little bit closer to the cabin. If you are exploring the back country and you see a staircase, don't approach it. Don't climb the stairs. Leave and act like you never saw anything. Our third story is called The Skin It Wears. The sun had just dipped below the horizon of the San Juan Mountains, plunging the trails of the San Juan National Forest into absolute blackness. I was doing a final sweep of the Piedra River Trail when my spotlight caught a flash of brown about 40 yards ahead. Assuming it was an elk or a mule deer, I slowed my truck to a crawl, intending to give it a polite honk to get it moving off the service road. The creature stopped grazing and turned its head. That's when the hairs on my arm stood up. The head looked more cow-like, but its eyes weren't on the sides of its head like a normal prey animal. They were flat, forward-facing, staring directly into my soul with an unnerving, calculating intelligence. It stood perfectly broadside, but its torso wasn't right. It was bulky and perfectly cylindrical, lacking the muscular swell of a deer's hindquarters, while also looking like it had chronic wasting disease. Before I could shift into park, the animal dropped its head. The sound of wet gravel scraping against something sharp echoed through my cab as it hoisted itself onto its hind legs. It stood nearly 6 feet tall, towering over the hood of my patrol truck, its front legs bent awkwardly like arms, hanging loosely by its sides, and malformed hooves that looked more like paws. The thing was entirely hairless on its belly, revealing mottled, grayish skin that stretched unnaturally tight over a ribcage that looked far too wide. Then it opened its mouth. It didn't snort, and it didn't bugle. Instead, it let out a wet, phlegmy wheeze that sounded exactly like a human trying to clear a congested throat. "Michael," it said. My stomach dropped and my blood ran cold. It had spoken my name, in my own voice. The creature then threw its arms out wide, shrieking while taking a single step toward my truck on its spindly, backward-bending legs. I panicked, slamming my foot on the accelerator. The truck bucked violently as the front tires hit something solid. The heavy metal grille crunched, and for a terrifying second, the vehicle felt like it was driving over rolling logs before it broke free onto the clear pavement. I didn't look back in my rearview mirror. I just drove straight to the ranger station, heart hammering against my ribs, and locked the doors behind me. I will never go back to that trailhead at night. Our fourth story is called Wrong Turn in the Woods. I'm writing this because I need to know if anyone else at the U.S. Forest Service is experiencing this, or if I'm just losing my mind. I've been a ranger for 3 years in the Yosemite National Park. When you get assigned to the deep backcountry, out past the established campgrounds, they give you a list of unofficial rules. 1. If you hear whistling, don't whistle back. 2. If you see a stray dog, it is not a dog. do not approach. And 3, if you hear your name being called, you do not respond, and you leave the area immediately. Then came last Monday. I was doing a routine night check in the Root National Forest sector. It was dead quiet. Usually you'll hear coyotes or elk, but the forest was completely dead of all wildlife sounds. At about 9 p.m., my truck's headlights caught a disruption in the tree line near the gravel road. At first, I thought it was an elk standing abnormally straight. I hit the high beams to get a better look, and the creature turned its head toward the vehicle. It was no bear or wolf. It stood nearly 8 feet tall on 2 hind legs, with the muscular, hulking torso of a bodybuilder and grayish matted fur. But the face was what made me stall. It had the elongated, snarling snout of a canine, completely unblinking, and the eyes the color of burning embers that reflected the halogen glare of my truck. It didn't run away. It just stared with an uncanny, intelligent malice. I was paralyzed, my mind racing, trying to understand what I was seeing. A loud, deep, guttural growl emitted from its throat as it slowly took a step forward, approaching the front bumper. The sound violently snapped me back to reality. I slammed the gear shift into reverse and floored it. The beast gave chase, tracking the vehicle with its wide, glowing eyes, keeping pace with my truck before it made a sudden turn and vanished into the tree line. I made it back to the ranger station, breathless. My supervisor took my report, but he didn't call animal control or dispatch. He just looked at me, told me to take a couple of days off, and quietly warned me to keep my doors locked at all times. If you're hiking, stay on the marked trails. And if you ever feel like you're being watched by something in the woods, chances are you are. And it's not your usual forest creature. It's something much worse. Our 5th and final story is called The Wandering Woman of the North Rim. There is a local legend of a tragedy from the 1920s. A mother who lost her husband and her son to the canyon during a fatal storm threw herself over the ledge in grief and is forever trapped, searching the abyss for her family. When superstition and folklore have a background to them, such as this, I count them in my mind as true more than anything. If you look up anything on the internet revolving around this in the Grand Canyon, there are multiple eyewitness reports of this woman. And I'm not saying the other stories aren't true, but what I am saying is that this one is probably the truest out of all of them. So keep this in mind while listening to this next story. The first thing you learn as a ranger working in the Grand Canyon is that the canyon gets eerily quiet at night. The wind does weird things down there, whistling through the rock like a flute, but there are certain sounds that are entirely unnatural, sounds that you never forget. I was on a late night patrol on the North Rim, hiking along the Transept Trail. It was late October. Most of the tourists had cleared out for the season, leaving the park in a heavy, suffocating silence. It started around 11:30 p.m. I was about a half mile from the Grand Canyon Lodge, shining my heavy-duty maglite into the black abyss of the gorge when I heard it. A sob, a raw, choked-off cry of pure agony that echoed from just over the rim. I paused, my boots freezing in the gravel. Protocol dictates you assume every distress call is a lost or injured hiker. I clicked my radio on. Dispatch. This is Ranger Hayes. I'm at mile marker 2. I've got a civilian in distress down the gorge. I'm going over to assist. I unhooked my climbing harness from my belt and started down a precarious, unmapped, social trail near the edge. The sobbing grew louder, clearer. It sounded like a woman sitting right on the precipice of weeping. "Ma'am, Park Service," I yelled into the wind, my heart slamming against my ribs. "Stay exactly where you are. The drop is 200 feet. Don't move." I swung my flashlight beam across the jagged drop-off, illuminating a sheer wall of coconino sandstone. The beam swept across the rocks and landed on her. She was standing on a sliver of rock no wider than a dinner plate, defying every law of physics and gravity. She hovered, suspended over the endless dark of the canyon. She wore a soaking wet, tattered white Victorian dress, heavily embroidered with small, faded, blue flowers. Her hair was drenched, clinging to her face, and her shoulders were heaving with a violent, soundless sob. A creeping, primal dread coiled in my gut. This wasn't an injured tourist. The nearest water was the Colorado River thousands of feet below. How had she gotten down there? Why wasn't she wearing a coat in the freezing winds? "Hey," I called out, reaching for my radio. "Step back from the ledge. I'm throwing you a rope." She stopped crying, slowly, unnervingly. She tilted her head to look up at me. She had no eyes, just weeping, empty, black pits that leaked a thick, tar-like substance down her pale cheeks. "Have you seen my little boy? My husband?" she whispered. Her voice didn't sound like it was coming from her mouth. It scraped and vibrated inside my own eardrums. I stumbled backward, my flashlight beam shaking wildly. She took a step forward, into thin air. She didn't fall, she glided. She floated effortlessly over the canyon, closing the distance between the cliff edge and the solid rock where I stood in mere seconds. The air around me instantly plummeted to freezing, and the stench of stagnant river water and rot filled my nose. I scrambled to my feet, abandoning all protocol, and sprinted blindly through the pitch-black woods. Behind me, her heart-wrenching wails filled the night air, bouncing off the canyon walls. I didn't look back. I just ran until I hit the paved pathway near the lodge, vomiting in the bushes from sheer adrenaline and terror. I never told dispatch what I saw that night. I wrote it off in my logbook as an unidentified vocal disturbance. But even now, when I'm on a night patrol, I can still hear her voice echoing in the wind, frantically asking about her husband and her son. And that, my little horror fiends, is all I have for you. I hope you enjoyed these 5 scary National Park forest stories. And I hope you heed the warnings of not answering anything back when it calls you from the woods. Until next time. You've been listening to Don't Whistle to the Wind. And as the tale ends, the candles have burned down to nothing, and the salt lines we drew have surely failed as the shadows have crept in. Don't let them catch you, and don't turn off the light.